Welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. I'm Johannon Ben-Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem, a technological New Jerusalem. That is the building of a better kind of society using advanced technology, a people's advanced technology, the most powerful revolutionary tool in human history being advanced computing, so called AI, but only if it's used in this way um, to better humankind, with focus on material conditions, with the focus necessarily then being on ending once and for all the influences of financial capital and empires, the empires that only exist to serve financial capital. And um, this is, um, I think, the most important of things to talk about in this world today, because we have 5 years left before we reach runaway overheating caused by capitalism's climate apocalypse, uh, wherein with each passing year or decade, um, this planet will become increasingly inhospitable to human life until such time as um, human life, mammalian life, perhaps all multicellular life can no longer exist on this planet. This is already, unfortunately, well in evidence by you can barely go a week without seeing um, in your environmental news feed and such um, some kind of catastrophic collapse of some ecosystem or another. I think one thing that's really indicative of this is that in the year 2023, according to a scientific study, no new oxygen was converted from CO2 by plants and oceanic plant life in the aggregate, that is, because effectively of this already this effect of runaway overheating and these other related effects. The lungs of the Earth have collapsed. It's not clear whether they will continue to function, but if that trend continues, that's a situation where there's not sufficient oxygen for human life in a few years. And this is all down to industrial outputs from capitalists, um, and this is a situation that we can stop if we take dramatic action before 2029. And if we do not do that, we will um, be the biggest failures in human history. Other societies of, uh, of past centuries, they were not such failures. They did not destroy the entire planet. And by other measures, the Westerner, and anytime you're using the word Westerner, right, you're really talking about the Eurocentric paradigm in institutional form. You're talking effectively about white supremacists, if you will. Try to avoid that word white, but it's a pretty powerful term. And white supremacist institutions. Um, but by the centuries past, the measures of centuries past, not only did other societies not destroy the planet, um, but they were better at life in other respects. In centuries past, if a human being were unhoused, um, people in the community would get together and build them a log cabin. They would say there's no reason for anyone to be unhoused. We're humble people, perhaps. We don't have so many nice and fancy things, but we can at least make sure that everyone has a roof over their head. But not the European descended white supremacist the Eurocentric institution, oh no, particularly in its most virulent and distilled form of the United States, um, this idea that people should have a roof over their head is more or less ignored. And millions, quite literally millions, the number is at an all-time high now. And that number at about 700,000 is the official number. Only includes people who have no roof over their head at all at any time. Unhoused people. It doesn't include people living out of their cars. It doesn't include people couch surfing. It doesn't include people in similarly precarious positions. That number is in the millions. And when you include people who are unstably housed in a broader sense because of the lack of a public health service, not living their best life because of this precarious for-profit housing scam, then that number is some significant percentage of American people. Um, um, and so we do this deliberate cruelty to people, and it's not. It can only really be described as racist, right? What is the difference between other highly capitalistic countries in the United States, that the United States should have this far more predatory neoliberal housing paradigm than others who will often have some kind of housing authority or basic protections to see that people are able to at least live indoors? Well, that's racism, right? This Eurocentric institution and the white supremacist, which is basically every European descended person, quite nearly, except for scientific communists, and similar people with a similar worldview. These people recognize, certainly on some level, on many levels maybe, recognize that they do harm to themselves and their fellow European descended people by these kinds of institutions, like a lack of a public health service, or the example given, a lack of a housing authority, the lack of other job guarantees, and things of this kind. They do harm to their so-called own people, but they're doing proportionally more harm to the underclass, who they wish to continue to commit acts of genocide against as much as possible, namely the new African and the indigenous Turtle Islander, and other so-called ethnic minorities. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day, formerly and by white supremacists still known as Columbus Day, but don't engage with that disgusting thing. This is Indigenous Peoples Day, so happy Indigenous Peoples Day. All power to the people, now and ever. Well, I was going to talk a little bit about the difficulty of being consistent in this kind of liberation-minded worldview, and the difficulty in knowing what kind of ideologies to study or be more open-minded to than others. Most ideas, most experiences, most institutions, most media in this Western world is bourgeois filth to be disregarded, and that's even true of many things that are generally held in this Western Eurocentric context to be of academic interest, but are not. But nevertheless, there is a tendency also to, and this may be described by the word ultra-leftism, right? That's a kind of a bad word in my view, ultra-leftism, because it's lumping together people who are legitimately fighting against this sort of CIA-run world with people who are pretty clearly CIA assets. I'll give some examples. I'm reading a biography about Walter Rodney, whose ideas were related to, I guess we could say, Trotskyism. And if you haven't read Walter Rodney's seminal work, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, please read it. I'll link to it in the comments. And if you have read it, read it again. It's really good. Um, and Walter Rodney it, came to this position of being not uniformly supportive of the state socialism of his time, the 70s and 80s, um, in the countries where he was working, um, African and Caribbean countries, because he was dedicated to this legitimately liberation-minded, permanent revolutionary action, this world revolutionist worldview that this is something that the Trotskyites were fixated on as well in the context of the Soviet Union. And Trotskyites are some of them are some of the smartest people I've ever met. But the preoccupation with undermining the forms of state socialism, I don't know that it's, well, for one thing, the USSR it doesn't exist anymore. So aside from it informing future endeavors, it's a little bit strange to obsess about what the USSR shouldn't have done. Almost all the people that ever worked on that project are dead. But in the context of all of these places, it's a problem of this thing that I described of discerning whether this thing is serving the legitimately liberation-minded organization, a legitimately revolutionary thing, the thing that's fighting against the CIA, or whether it's more serving a CIA agenda, set of talking points, and program. And it's not always the clearest of things, but if you are saying to a person of color who's fighting for this more third worldist kind of position that they shouldn't do that, you might be on the wrong side of things. Another example, and one that I've talked about at some length on this channel before, is the Posadists. The Posadists of the 20th century, because I've described something like a neo-Posadist view, I guess. But the Posadists of the 20th century were people who were had been harmed by apocalyptic sort of experiences of CIA-backed militias destroying their country, an extremely commonplace experience in South America today and in decades past. So they were also Trotskyists who were fighting for permanent revolution, and they themselves had developed quite an apocalyptic worldview, but I don't know that that's the apocalyptic aspect of that is the most important thing to say there, so much as that they were right? They viewed the CIA-run world as a thing which was causing such harm that it would end the species, which is what happened, because we did not fight against those people. So they were, they talked about things like first strike, nuclear strike, first strike against the fascist United States, and other things rather more speculative than that. But that impulse to fight this worst fascist system that's ever existed, the thing which has overwhelmingly been the cause of the near-term extinction of humankind, as I described at the top of the show, that it was the correct one. And so there's um, the line is between what would be characterized with this pejorative ultra leftism and what would be legitimate further left action is not always clear, and it generally does come down to how much is the CIA invested in using this talking point, and Western intelligence agencies and forces of this kind generally invested in using this talking point to undermine other more established institutions of the leftist kind. Um, and but I think for all of us, it's important to read serious scientific communist thinkers, and I would include Posadas there, even though his work over a period of time sometimes lapsed into somewhat of an incoherent view. Um, Charming, um, romantic, exciting ideas, but a little bit less than coherent at points. This is perhaps um, demonstrated in the fact that the showrunners and writers of shows like Star Trek or The X Files, two quite expansive universes um, in the entertainment world, borrowed quite heavily from this Posadist worldview. And uh, the um, uh, well, the main thing, really, I think, in discussing any such thing is how do we build this thing that stops capitalism's climate apocalypse before it contributes to the death of all humankind, or many, many billions, which, if you are downplaying either of those outcomes, as I've rarely seen a single human being who doesn't, um, particularly if you're downplaying, well, you don't downplay the extinction of humankind, but don't downplay the death of many billions either, because that's a very racist position, right? Because the capitalist climate apocalypse, as it stands in 2024, has already caused the death of millions and displaced many millions of people. And who are those people? The people in the global south, the people like the Posadists that I described, or the Tanzanians. Um, that's to say, people in the global south who have already had their resources stolen to such a degree that they do not have the critical infrastructure necessary to adapt in the same way to the problems of the climate crisis as the people in the global north. So they're being penalized again and again for the crimes of this CIA-run world and the fascist United States. So when you say something like, I don't think everyone will die, Ben, you are just about the biggest racist that's ever uttered a single word, because what you're saying is that this situation where people in the global south are penalized, and that's to say murdered in great number, and the people of the global north, these people in this Eurocentric set of institutions, are rewarded for their ongoing crimes over and over again, that's an acceptable outcome, and that the mass murder of those people, on par with any genocide that's ever occurred already, and increasingly with each passing year to become a worse genocide than any that has ever occurred, that this is not a problem, because there's a chance, a slim chance probably, but a chance that you, a person in the global north, might be able to survive that set of circumstances. And it is a slim chance. When you have a situation where billions of people are dying in a series of years, that's an extremely precarious set of circumstances. There's no way, no matter how many resources you have, how clever you are, for you to predict if you will end up on the right side of that. So the thing to do in the basic self-interest is to fight to stop capitalism's climate apocalypse And we can't fully reverse, we can't even begin to reverse the effects that have already, the damage that's already been done, but we can stop it from escalating to the point where planet Earth is effectively turned into the planet Venus by the effects that I mentioned, like the stopping of the conversion of O2, of CO2 to O2, um, the making of new oxygen, breathable atmosphere, um, and other such effects, and we can at least stop that and avoid um, turning this among the worst of genocides into the worst genocide that's ever existed, that's ever occurred. And how do we do that in this 5 year time frame? Looking at such a Goliath um, as U.S. fascism and Western fascism. Um, well, we again have to turn to this most advanced of computing tools that we can possibly have at our disposal that would actually serve the survival of humankind, which is not what advanced computing is generally being used for today. It's not being used to help people or improve their lives in other respects either. It's basically just a plaything of warmongers. This genocide of the better part of 500,000 people in a year. That is a genocide of Palestinian people, um, killing 1 in 5 of all Palestinians. Um, um, this was coordinated by people like Palantir and these corporations that are highly connected to this U.S. Fascism and techno-fascism, which is most of big tech. It's not some cuddly teddy bear, not Silicon Valley. Right? It's better to think of this as the Great Satan. Right? A fascist and a techno-fascist are the same person, and these are all techno-fascists. Um, and all this is a kind of convenient subterfuge, in my view. This escalation to the brink of World War III, because if this kind of thing were not dominating people's thinking and the activity of nation states at this time, people would be uniting to stop capitalism's climate apocalypse, which would be good for everyone, including the evildoers behind capitalism's climate apocalypse, who could not possibly survive on a world without O2 any better than anyone else. Um, but it's bad for the financial capital itself, which is the only thing that the fascist cares about, really, is financial capital, empire, and the crimes and the racism. All of that is in service to vast private fortunes, and all of the ideology that upholds that and that confuses all of us every day is in service to those vast private fortunes at the detriment of the building of a humane and sustainable economic system. Um, but we can use this advanced computing to build that. And in my thinking, the way to do this is to use open source large language models, which are becoming powerful enough now to be of use as actors, AI agents, as they're widely known and understood by people who take an interest in advanced computing. And the AI agent of 2025 may or may not be able to dazzle you with its ability as an autonomous agent, but it is sufficiently agentic, I think, in any case, by the standards of, say, Llama 3.2, to build this workforce multiplier that I suggested in the title, which is a thing that is it's of little difference, of little importance if you personally, it might be important to you, but at a continental scale, it's of little importance if you have an AI agent that's able to, say, double your earnings every year. That might allow you to do better work as a comrade, and I hope that it does. I hope I want only the best for everyone. But in terms of this ticking time bomb of capitalism's climate apocalypse, whether some thousands of individuals are slightly empowered by um, the use of AI agents for a few years before they're all killed is not that important of a development. But what is important is this thing as a larger, a mass entity, a mass movement and institution that would be a workforce multiplier and intelligence enhancer. And that is a thing that could easily be achieved by using specially tailored open source large language models that are designed to work with other large language models on a network, and to have people download those open source LLMs and create this highly automated work group, which would allow this number of people to do a good deal more with less than I think same number of highly skilled engineers and scientists operating without the benefit of such. And you can pretty obviously observe that large language models, by the standards of late 2022 or 2023, were sufficiently knowledgeable as to bridge the gap for you in this area, let's say, allowing you to do work more like that of a skilled engineer or scientist without such training. And when you consider then that this workforce multiplier is really the thing there that allows us, and with thousands of people, it allows us to begin to transform some cityscape, maybe for the better, maybe begin to start to move the needle on something like stopping capitalism's climate apocalypse, but with hundreds of thousands or millions of users interoperating in this special way, it becomes a thing that is sufficiently robust, agile, and necessarily amorphous from its beginnings to be outside of being able to be subdued or subverted by these fascistic Western forces who have undermined with great efficiency and no scruples or concern whatsoever for humankind in the doing. They've undermined technological planned economies, very similar projects that were run by state actors. I give the example of Allende's Chile and the CyberSyn project, which was developed from 1971 to 1973. It was for its time a very sophisticated and revolutionary technological planned economy that was poised to take over the operations of sectors in Marxist Chile, and this would have inspired much of the rest of South America to similarly automate and nationalize holdings. This is not an acceptable outcome for the fascist United States, and so they destroyed and murdered Salvador Allende, and destroyed and murdered they murdered many other people besides, and destroyed the functioning of that economic system, and imposed the Pinochet regime, which kind of coincides with a kind of laboratory for the neoliberal, highly fascistic economic systems that developed there, and in the years to follow were developed and implemented in the United States. This world that we know today, where life expectancy of Americans has fallen off of a cliff as a result. Shouldn't be surprising that a country with a for-profit healthcare system that kills 100,000 people a year, or the housing abomination as opposed to the housing authority that I described, or other such dirty tricks in a great number, should see a falling life expectancy. But it is surprising to most Americans, who have ingested bourgeois ideological filth to such a degree that they're not able to even discern their own best interests or the workings of systems really much at all. And I'm going to change gears a little bit to then discuss some ideas about the use of large language models in some interesting ways. And I'm going to touch on this thing that's touched upon in The Republic of Walmart, a book about using this using advanced computing to transform supply chains in the way that for-profit concerns, which should not exist and do not benefit humankind, like Amazon or Walmart, have managed to automate in the ways that CyberSyn would have automated, but of course not providing any real benefit to anyone, being a dramatic net negative, and anything that is extracting resources from the people and consolidating wealth in the hands of a few, and thus the resulting inhumanity and destruction to the environment. That's always going to be a net negative, and don't ever believe for a second that there's some good that comes out of things like this. And people, transhumanists, people of this ilk, for example, often will comment with sneer. Everything these people say practically is with a sneer, that on this Republic of Walmart kind of thinking that if only the Soviet Union had automated systems of the kind that Amazon now has, what they could have done. Of course, these people have no interest in building this USSR 2.0. They have no interest in using anything in any way that benefits humanity, that defies the operations of financial capital. So it's literally just said with a sneer by almost all of these people. But we could do this, and that requires an understanding of the use of, because they're so good at destroying these things associated with state actors, the use of decentralized autonomous organizations and multi-agent systems made up of large language models that I have described at some length already in this talk and many others, and building this open source LLM, MAS, and DAO, we can build a thing that can become strong enough with millions of users, or even hundreds of thousands of users, to stop capitalism's climate apocalypse, which necessarily means either the dismantling of U.S. fascism, the complete obliteration of the U.S. state in form, or the bringing to heel of such forces in such dramatic way by overpowering them, or forcing them to listen to reason. And they will only ever listen to reason if forced. That should be well in evidence by the fact that no one on earth virtually wants capitalism's climate apocalypse to occur, and yet no one has been in a position to organize in such a way as to stop that from occurring, because financial capital is prioritized over the very existence of the people who benefit from it, and that concentration of private wealth and empire, and everyone else, to a higher degree, everyone else is harmed by this. I'm going to talk about the use of multi-agent systems of the kind that I've described in the context of healthcare now, and because I think we can discuss some things of real interest there, and maybe some new ways of looking at this use of this novel open source multi-agent system as workforce multiplier. So this part of the conversation we could title Leveraging Multi-Agent Systems and Large Language Models for Enhanced Outcomes in Public Health. The integration of these multi-agent systems and large language models in single payer public healthcare frameworks um, would hold immense potential for improving patient care, the surveillance of disease, and research generally. And again, if the system, the degree to which the system deviates from that single payer model is a degree to which it's already killing many of its own citizens. The United States would be responsible in this post-COVID world by its for-profit death care system for about 100,000 deaths a year. So you will find people in this world, mad men, um, mostly, talking about these very things, improving patient care, using advanced computing, improving disease surveillance using advanced computing in a for-profit context. But these people are self-deceived at best, if not bad actors, and they are only going to contribute to this problem. More and more people being forced to an early grave by this for-profit healthcare system. It must be done away with. So there's no conversation about things like this without first saying that we need a single-payer public health service in every land. But by automating these various processes um, and by applying this workforce multiplier principle, we can enhance public health outcomes, reduce dramatically the workload on various health care professionals in those systems, and enable quicker responses to things like a disease outbreak. This is a good example of a disease outbreak because and that suggesting that neoliberals are not able. If you take exception to the idea that 100,000 people are killed because of for-profit healthcare in the United States a year, which you shouldn't because it's a fact, you can look to this area of the COVID outbreak of 2020 as an example of the failure of neoliberals in this arena. It would have been an easy thing to do, and if the United States had insisted upon it or worked toward it, that airlines could have been shut down at the very beginning of 2020, and there would have been no coronavirus spreading around the world. And the only reason that was not done is because, again, the interests of the ruling elites and vast private fortunes are valued over the interests of human beings. Some of those people died, right? Some of those ruling elites died of coronavirus. But this thing, capitalism, is a thing without a brain. So they all play by the rules that they've set forth, which are more fascistic capitalistic rules, and some of them die as a result, as well as many millions more of working people around the world, particularly, of course, in the global south, and in places like the United States, which were just at every turn doing the absolute wrong thing when they could have easily prevented. Even if the airlines had not been shut down, they could have prevented with lockdown and mask mandates and other appropriate measures this death of millions in the United States alone and many millions around the world. But this was not done. So when we say, oh, we can use advanced computing to understand disease outbreaks, right? It's again a little bit of a cart and horse problem, right? The people who are not going to solve the problem of a single payer, building a single payer public health system, are not going to be actually in a position to do things like better disease surveillance and in any real way. Similarly, people who are not willing to do the basics of stopping disease outbreaks are not going to be in a position to use AI to stop disease outbreaks. There are a great number of for-profit concerns that say that they are going to do these things. Just believe me when I say that all of those people are liars and lunatics. but nevertheless, we can begin to have some inroads into this thing of personalized AI-driven medicine and effective disease surveillance and more efficient research and so forth. Traditional methods do fall short in addressing some of these things because of this lack of advanced computing, limitations in data processing analysis, and a real-time decision making on the part of things like agents. Improving the number of man hours that could be applied to these systems. So the advent of multi-agent systems and the use of open source large language models, and we need to stipulate that these be open source large language models in all of these contexts, because you cannot really be working with, again, just as you cannot be expecting good outcomes from the neoliberal mandates of for-profit death care systems. You can't be working with CIA mega assets, Google, and people whose only real job is to make the world worse and empower empire, which is most of big tech, if you genuinely want to solve problems. And so we can work with open source large language models that are of equal or similar strength and will not shit the bed in the way that these techno-fascists will invariably shit the bed. Multi-agent systems can then automate various healthcare processes while large language models within analyze vast amount of data to provide insights that inform decision making. And so we can look then now at a conceptual framework and implementation strategies and thus the benefits of leveraging this open source large language model network into a multi-agent system as it relates to public health. The multi-agent system consists of multiple autonomous agents. I've described them as needing to be steered by human beings. That's a necessity of the technology of 2025 because without a certain degree of oversight from human beings, they will grind to a halt or hallucinate, do things like this, and become less than efficacious. But even if that were not the case, let's say the year is 2028 and the problem of AI hallucination and such has mostly been solved, we still would have the problem of systems not serving human interests if a large number of human beings are not running them. That's an essential problem of these techno-fascists, and so we should not fall into the trap of building new generations of techno-fascism when we intended to do otherwise. And that means involving larger and larger number of human beings in this advanced computing phenomena. In the context of healthcare, these AI agents can perform a variety of tasks or contribute overwhelmingly to the improvement of those tasks in this steering framework that I described, such as monitoring patient health, analyzing data, and providing personalized care recommendations. A key advantage of multi-agent systems include their ability to handle complex tasks, adapt to changing conditions, and collaborate to achieve ultimate optimal outcomes in a quicker pace and at a larger scale. Large language models like those that I've described can understand, by the standards of 2025, generate and interpret human language and not just understand the language, but understand the context and activity to such a degree that they are able to become autonomous actors, and even more so at this larger scale, multi-agent system scale. LLMs are trained on vast amounts of text data and can perform natural language processing tasks. This was true even at the end of 2022, throughout 2023 and 2024. In this single payer AI run healthcare context, such LLMs will be able to analyze individual and patient metadata, contextualize all of that in the state-of-the-art medical development and literature, and synthesizing other relevant information to provide insights that improve decision making to such a degree that it's my view that this highly automated single payer public health service empowered by the specialized multi-agent system that I've described would be able to cure disease and improve conditions for human beings at a quicker and quicker pace to such a degree that I think that it's a realistic possibility of indefinite lifespan in the near term, in a decade or so, even universal super longevity for all of human beings. Anybody who wants it could have indefinite lifespan, I think, in a decade or so. But this isn't something that's often when you hear this, you will hear it said by these people, these neoliberal bad actors who are self-deceived, persons who are supporting the for-profit death care system. Does quite the opposite. And so these people, by and large, the life extension community, are people who they're often quite wealthy, and they're often just buying snake oil and sawdust pills and gadgets that don't do that much, and spending quite a lot of money on this. And those are essentially the same problem, right? Because we can build this public health service that's able to cure virtually all disease and treat aging ultimately as a reversible condition, and then that's the paradigm by which they get this thing that they want. Their resources should be going into that, but again, they've ingested bourgeois ideological filth to such a degree. They're promoting their own class interests over the larger interests of humankind, as I suggested in other contexts, to such a degree that they will use what resources they have to build things that will not build the thing that they want, because the human-centered approach, the socialistic approach, is not something that they would deign to consider. These people are pigs. One of the primary applications of multi-agent systems and this LLM workforce multiplier in healthcare is the provision of personalized care recommendations. Again, you can read about this at great length, but if you don't have this caveat where you state that this sort of work must be done in the context of a highly automated and 21st century appropriate single payer public health service, it doesn't. It's not. It's always going to be a non-starter. But the use of these socialistic workforce multiplier LLMs can analyze patient data, including electronic health records, medical history, and real-time health metrics to generate tailored care plans that improve life dramatically for the masses. For example, this LLM can identify patterns in patient data that indicate the need for specific interventions in ways that other systems might overlook. Going well beyond just the general tendency to suggest broad lifestyle lifestyle changes, and similarly drilling down on the necessary medications or treatments in a more specific way. Implementation of this specialized large language model healthcare system. We have data integration that uses special advanced algorithms to integrate data from various sources, a variety of which are already in use, but are like many technologies and devices siloed and for-profit concerns. This information is not shared and it's not used in a very sensible way at all. But this more integrated data, which requires this power to the people principle, can provide a comprehensive view of a patient's health status, um, in a better way, dramatically better way than operating on a similar principle within those um, siloed for-profit concerns. Pattern recognition also scales in a similar way. The use of LLMs to identify patterns in patient data across populations or for individuals will indicate the need for increasingly specific and beneficial interventions. For example, a large language model can analyze trends in blood pressure, heart rate, and other vital signs to detect early signs of health issues that would be overlooked by those not operating within this perspicacious LLM system. Um, a recommendation generator generate personalized care recommendations based on these identified patterns. Again, you can read about things along these lines, but it bears repeating always that with outside of the single pair um, framework, the damage done by the for-profit systems will be far greater than any benefit that might derive at any scale from making such adjustments. Um, the interoperability of integrating data from existing healthcare systems and formats is a tricky and crucial question. Um, it is why I believe that we have to build this large language model work group in the generalized context so that it can begin to insinuate itself into these sectors and leverage in a variety of ways. The most pressing of which has little to do with the running of single-payer public health services, as I mentioned. The most pressing concern for all of humankind is stopping the effects of capitalism's climate apocalypse. But all of these things are closely related. All of these are the ravages of empire and financial capital. Um, Implementing real-time monitoring systems, I alluded to. Um, um, this is an important feature of any public health service, and the most important central feature of the highly automated LLM-driven single-payer public health institution. Um, 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 Going to skip some of my notes at this point, and this is getting a little on the long side. So, um, the use of multi-agent systems of the kind that I've described in socialistic healthcare institutions can offer a new level of efficiency by transforming and the workload, effectively reducing the workload on healthcare professionals and enabling them to focus on more critical tasks by automating from so many different kinds of processes, such as patient monitoring, data analysis, and literature review. Multi-agent systems of the kind can save a tremendous time and effort, allowing the healthcare professionals, or in the context of the multi-agent system as I described it, the layperson who has been good enough to involve himself in the running of this system to provide a better care for all the patients, themselves included. The integration of this open source large language model framework then is of paramount importance, and we absolutely must begin to build this. The real problem for building this open source large language model workforce multiplier is to some degree a technical one, right? You have to specially modify the open source large language model so it's able to work with others in some multi-agent system of some scale. But the problem really is the scale. The open source large language models exist in great variety and can, with relative ease, be made to work into multi-agent systems. There are multi-agent systems in existence that demonstrate this capability, but what they're not doing is uniting many hundreds of thousands or millions of people to work on the highest level projects that could possibly be undertaken. And so this largely then becomes cultural concern. And How do we inspire people to participate in this in great number? It's not a question that I have a real good answer to. A lot of times things like this um, become feasible when some kind of meme or other that might not be that closely related to the ultimate outcome gets people to begin participating. And um, uh, I wish that weren't the way that things are, but sometimes that is the way that things are. But to me, the most important thing to say here is that we have 5 years left before runaway overheating from capitalism's climate apocalypse um, renders all of human history and human undertaking and all of human feeling irrelevancy because when humans are extinct in the decades to follow 2029, if we do not get off of this path, it will be as if none of this had ever happened. It will be as if um, no achievement were ever ever reached at all. And so, if you have some ideas about how to begin to build a thing that would be culturally relevant and thus scalable uh, to building such a large language model open source work group, I hope that you will maybe reach out to me. Maybe you don't like me. Maybe you have another kind of organization, but I hope that you will nevertheless consider doing everything in your power to build this thing, which is the people's superintelligence. And I think that we really have to do that the right way, which means not um, building the thing more like what I described in other shows where I talk about the Linux community um, or some other communities becoming the center of this rather than, say, um, venture capitalists who will immediately, even if they say that that's not what they're going to do, they will immediately undermine the project by distorting its purpose and turning it into the plaything of financial capital and empire at the expense of the stated goal. This is pretty well in evidence by the OpenAI organization, which started as something like an advanced computing oversight board designed to fix problems of this kind, but is now a for-profit concern with no such capability at all. The use of this LLM workforce multiplier um, is also extends only to large numbers of people if it is transparent. And so this requires that patients and those comrade users who are steering the LLM and the healthcare professionals working within it have a good understanding of how the technologies are being used and how they are affecting care decisions. The opposite of this, a black box effect, is something that the for-profit healthcare concerns are happy to have. Generally, this black box effect is concealing a multitude of sins. It's generally the thing which is concealing the problems of financial capital and empire itself. That's why you should not trust AI pundits who talk about superintelligence in terms of an alien force that will destroy humankind, not because those risks are not real, but because none of those would even be problems at all if and when we remove the influence of financial capital and empire from the equation. And by and large, the people who are these AI doomers are people who are not interested in removing financial capital and empire from the equation. So they are a little better than CIA assets in that regard, and that would be most of the AI alignment community. um, the I have so many notes. Let's see. The integration of this large language model multi-agent system as described into public health services does hold a breathtaking potential for improving patient care, disease surveillance, and research if applied in this socialistic single payer set of methodologies. By automating these processes, these technologies will enhance health outcomes, reduce workload, as I have said, and enable quicker responses to other problematic features like disease outbreaks. The successful implementation of this multi-agent system in healthcare does require a comprehensive approach that addresses existing organizational challenges. It makes use of existing and emerging technologies and is done in a transparent and reasonable way. This approach includes the development of increasingly advanced algorithms to this end. I think that this path to people's superintelligence using moderately agentic open source large language models is also a path in a relatively short order to some effects along the lines of AI recursion or self-improvement of these systems. But by and large, the people who, again, are interested in these things, self-improving systems, are people who are playing by a very bad set of rules, a rigged set of rules, working within this U.S. fascist framework, and so such a thing could not be called super intelligent or self-improving if its self-improving or highly intelligent qualities are those that harm people rather than help them, or that's super idiocy, not super intelligence, and this is why people like Google were scratching their chins in the early 2020s and saying we have these things that could be transformative, but yet we don't know how to implement them. That's because they're unwilling to implement them in ways that would actually be helpful in improving material conditions for human beings, not because they hate human beings, but because they love empire and financial capital much more and only are willing to operate by those set of rigged rules. But by leveraging this power of a people's superintelligence using an open source large language model multi-agent system as a workforce multiplier, we can build this dramatically more efficient, innovative, and equitable set of systems, in this context, a set of public health services that benefit all of humankind. And I think that that is the most important sort of work that anyone in this world can hope to do. And this can only really be undertaken if we are able to build this large language model workforce multiplier as this thing amorphous enough to avoid being sabotaged by the fascist West, by this decentralized autonomous organization model. And in the time frame that remains to us, the 5-year ticking clock, so we can see benefits well beyond that of even, I think, universal super longevity from this building of a people's superintelligence, if we are able to wrestle this most powerful revolutionary tool away from the fascists, who mostly are in possession of it today, and most importantly build the thing at the larger and larger scale that benefits all of humankind. The artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining, and on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one, for you see, dear comrade, very soon techno-communism will win. Thank you.